one and all, and listen to tales of excitement and adventure. Tales of daring heroes, savage monsters, and bards who just couldn't keep it in their pants. Tales of friendship, nobility, drunken foolishness, and unforgettable fun. These are tales of role-playing games, fair listeners, and this is Rollin' Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome to Rollin' Bones with Ryan Howard, your RPG treasure trove. I am your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and joining us this evening, he is the creator of Hyperborea, which is a fantastic OSR system setting, all around just cool-looking product. The third edition is out now on Kickstarter. Looking at fulfillment towards the end of the year and early next year. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm bearing the lead here. Welcome to Rollin' Bones, Jeffrey Talanian. Jeffrey, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate being on.
No problem at all. It's always good to have someone from this space come on, especially someone with a campaign that is going on right now. So let's begin at the beginning here with some of these questions that everyone gets asked when they come on.
Okay.
We're going to start right at the beginning. How did you get into RPGs?
Well, I was in the 5th grade, and it was a typical New England winter, and it was there was an indoor recess because it was snowing so hard outside. Back in the days when we still had school when it snowed. So one of the kids brought this game into class, and it was called Dungeons and Dragons. And so he showed us this game, and we played it during indoor recess. There were like 3 of us, and so we had so much fun with it, creating characters and stuff like that. My first character was like I said, I was in the 5th grade. My first character was Balbo Baggins, cousin of Bilbo, of course. And so we played in school for a little while, and then we had so much fun we decided, hey, let's get together right after school and continue this game. And we were playing the Keep on the Borderlands, and it just took it from there. And I got super into it, and I soon ordered my own set, which was the Holmes box set of basic D&D. And started running games for the neighborhood kids where I lived.
Gotcha. Cool. So you've already answered one of the other questions that I like to ask everyone as far as who your favorite character or who your first character was.
Yeah, okay.
So that's good to know right off the beginning. I feel like everyone's first RPG character is a ripoff of some other fantasy character.
Right. We were young and just trying to figure out something, and we didn't know, I guess, when you're kids, you just go with what is influencing you at that time, and you just try and have some fun with it,
Mm-hmm.
which is great, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. I've not had anyone answer that question with, this is my wholly original character, with 0 noticeable inspirations that I just came up with at the spur of the moment when I first started playing. And if I do ever get that, I'll know that someone is lying to me.
Right. I know. It wasn't until I think, even going deeper into the 1980s, there was a lot of that going on. And then I think when the 90s came along and all the White Wolf vampire type games started to show up, mm-hmm. and the more storytelling oriented games started to appear, people started to come up with these long, elaborate origin stories for the character. I used to cringe when some of my guys would show up with like a 3-page origin of their character. And You know, I remember one time there was a guy whose character was killed, within an hour of him, reading
Yep.
off this origin story of his guy. That he was so upset. He was like, "I put so much work into that origin story." I'm like, "Well, maybe you shouldn't have done that."
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing about OSR and all of that original stuff. When I talk about wanting an in-depth backstory for my players, I'm speaking as a fifth edition GM when I say that, because in those older style games, when you have characters starting at early levels, the likelihood of them dying pretty high. You're gonna.
Yeah, they're pretty fragile, which is why one of the things I like to encourage is I try to tell them, um, don't come up with an elaborate origin story for your first level character. Let your early adventures of your first level character, if you survive to that third level or fourth level, then those early adventures, those are your origin story.
Yeah, exactly. So, how would you describe your play style when it comes to both, playing an actual RPG and then when you step behind the screen as a GM?
Well, I do enjoy a variety of character types when I'm a player. Like right now, I'm playing in an old school Essentials game, and I'm playing a half orc knight. So this character is he's very honor bound, even though he's lawful evil. He's so he's a take charge kind of guy and wants to, organize everything. But I've also can play the complete flip type of character where I enjoy playing a thief or some type of, magic user type class. So I like to bounce all around and experiment with different things. One of my favorite characters I ever played for several years from the throughout most of the '90s was a necromancer when we were playing second edition AD&D, and so I like to bounce around. Um, but as far as my style when I'm behind the screen, I guess it all depends on the campaign and the setting that I'm running at the time. I've had several um, long term campaigns that I've run over the years. I've been doing this since 1981. So, it's been 40 years of doing this stuff. And so I've run worlds that I've made up. I've run Greyhawk extensively. Um, and lately for the last decade, I've been running my Hyperborea games, which has its own tone and flavor because it's inspired by the pulp fiction authors such as Clark Ashton Smith and Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft. So it has more of that sort of dark tone to it, and it's a human based setting. So but I do enjoy running games like Greyhawk that have all, the elves and the dwarves and halflings and all the machinations of that setting and its history and stuff like that. Um, so I guess it's the same answer to both parts of your question, that it's a variety of things. I don't really pin myself to one specific style.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Now, do you find yourself primarily behind the screen as the GM, as so many uh, designers and writers within role playing do, or do you get to step on the other side every now and then?
Well, I would say that for since the mid '90s, yes, it was mostly me with my group. I've been playing with the same group of guys since about 1993. We've had a few people that have left over that span of time and a few other guys that have come in, but it's mostly been me. But in the last few years, we have a player that's been running games a lot himself, so it's nice. So I'm basically splitting time, and it's nice because so we'll text each other during the week because our game is every Tuesday night, and we'll text each other during the week and say, do you want to run this week or do you want to run? And, if one of us is like, oh, I have an event for one of my kids, I'm going to be, busy, I'm going to be a little bit late, so do you mind running the game? So it's nice to have that luxury that either one of us can run on any given week.
Absolutely. Now, this can be a difficult question when you have so much invested in this hobby of RPGs. There's a lot of fond memories tied up with the hobby itself, but if you had to pick a fondest RPG memory, what would that be?
Fondest RPG memory. It's really tough, but because there's been so many good ones. But a recent one that we're still talking about, and it happened several months ago, that was just hilarious, was the player character party was fighting a vampire, and it was a tough fight on the early going, but they started to get the upper hand, and the vampire was not just going to allow himself to be slain by these player characters. So he assumed his sort of gaseous form. He turned into this sort of mist, right? And he's attempting to escape. So one of the guys in the party said, one of my players said, "Oh, I have a bellows in my backpack." I'm like, "What are you doing with the bellows?" It's like, he shows us his character sheet. He's like, "It's right here. It's on my character sheet." I'm like, "Okay, what are you going to do with the bellows?" He's like, "I'm going to suck the vampire into the bellows." And I'm like, all right, so this is where tabletop RPGs totally destroy video game counterparts, right? Because you can't just make something up like that in a video game. This is where, player creativity trumps, the defined parameters of a video game. So he comes up with this idea, and so in the Hyperborea system, we have different tests and feats that you can perform that are attribute based. So you can have like a test of strength, which is a normal hard thing to do for a strong person, or an extraordinary feat of strength, which is doing something super heroic. It's also for dexterity and constitution, these things. So I said to him, okay, so let's have you roll an extraordinary feat of dexterity, because this seems like something impossible. So it's a percentile roll, and I forget what he needed. He needed it was somewhere around, he'd probably remember, it was something like 24% or 32% chance of success. And he made the roll. So he sucked up the vampire into the bellows. And, the group goes wild. They're all high-fiving. We have a, vampire imprisoned in a bellows. And it's just it's the kind of things like that just make it worth playing, right? Because you have so much fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of fun. I killed a vampire by doing X stupid thing or X hilarious thing. That's up there. That actually tops the best one I'd heard so far was taking a sun sword in a mage hand and dropping it in Strahd's coffin. That's the one you just surpassed there. So.
I don't know. That's a good one too.
That's a pretty good one.
Did they kill him?
Yeah, they killed him. I was not in that game. I heard that story secondhand from the dungeon master, but that's how his players got around fighting Strahd. Yeah.
So they even went further, my guys. After they had the vampire stuck in the bellows, right? They made a raft and they stuck it on this river, and they waited till the sunlight was blazing perfectly, and they set up a series of mirrors around the bellows, and then they did something to make the bellows open up. So that the mist would come out, and then all the sunlight and the mirrors would just fry the vampire in daylight.
Oh, God, that's torture.
Right, but it's so funny because it probably took them, it was probably they discussed it for so long that it was probably like a 45-minute endeavor in real time, because they were going through all the different things that they should do. How are they going to kill this thing? It's just so funny. But that's when they're having fun, right?
Yep, absolutely. Those manic planning sessions where someone's got the ribbon on the map and all that, those are the best to witness as a GM.
And until they start to argue about something, and it's like they can't make a decision, and you're like, all right, somebody needs to make a decision here.
So oftentimes, like you said, those things can be derailed by arguments, and sometimes those are caused by problem players, because let's face it, we share the table with all kinds of different people. Some of them we love, and some of them we don't. So if you have a kind of best or worst story about that guy who ruined everything for everyone that you're comfortable sharing on the show, what would that be?
Oh, geez. There's been there's been so many things that, somebody has done something that was, so dumb that it totally, it's usually because what usually happens, I don't have any specific instances that I want to cite, but what usually happens is the players come up with a plan to do something, and they decide, I have about 6 guys in my group, right? It varies from week to week. It could be 5 on a given week or whatever. So if they come up with some type of elaborate plan to manage something, and they decide that it's time to execute it, and one of the guys just decides that he's just going rogue and doing his own thing, and they're, the rest of the guys are just, shocked and chagrined that he didn't follow the plan, and that, so it always turns into this huge debate, like, why didn't you listen? So I mean, there's always guys like that, and so, I guess you have to address it sometimes with potentially problem players who don't want to collaborate with the rest of the group, and or guys who like want to hog the spotlight, or what I like to say is, there's one microphone in the room, you at some point you have to drop the microphone and give it to the next person, because you could have the the player that's that talks too much, right? And they're usually a good player, and they're very creative and everything, but at some point you have to give up the mic.
Yep, absolutely. So last of these introductory questions here before we kind of dive into the specifics of your career and your campaign here.
Sure.
And I'll tell you, the answer to this question can be as philosophical or as sophomoric as you want it to be.
Okay.
But with the exception of your logo or the name of your game, if you could put anything on a t-shirt, what would it be?
Oh, boy. These are strange questions. If I could put anything on a t-shirt,
yeah.
Do you mean like a piece of art or anything?
Anything. Piece of art, slogan, some kind of appliance. I've had people do that to me before. Anything.
I mean, does it have to be something that hasn't been done before?
It can be anything you want. If you think it's been done before, it's okay.
I would. Okay, so, I guess I haven't seen it before, but I'm sure it's been done because I follow the Frazetta girls so much. But the Frank Frazetta painting that was originally on the paperback novel Conan the Conqueror, when he's on the horse and he's got the axe in hand and his stallion is just like rearing up, and that's one of my favorite paintings of all time. I always loved that one. I thought it would look awesome on a t-shirt.
Definitely.
It's probably been done. I don't know. I haven't looked around.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to Joe Manganiello about whether or not that's on a t-shirt.
I know.
Cool.
Yeah,
well,
he's done some stuff with the Frazetta girls, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got. I think it's Death Dealer 4 or 5 that I have on a hoodie that I bought from Death Saves.
Oh, I can one up you on that one. I have a Death Dealer denim jacket. I bought a whole bunch of
Nice.
Death Dealer patches and put them all in this jacket. Went out to dinner with my wife to a nice restaurant the other night, and I'm like, and she was looking at what I was wearing. She's like, "You're gonna wear your Death Dealer jacket?" I'm like, "Yeah, why not? I'm just being me."
The things that our wives put up with. My wife
Right?
is on right now, and I'm sure there have been times where I've left the house in my D&D tomato t-shirt, where
Right.
she's like, "Are you really gonna wear that where we're
Yeah.
going?" But
It is what it is. You have to accept me for who I am, honey.
absolutely. Cool. Well, those are the introductory questions that everyone gets asked. So, let's dig in here. You mentioned running a lot in the the world of Greyhawk. So, I mean, let's start there. You actually got the chance to work, through Troll Lord Games with Gary Gygax on Castle Zagyg, or however that is supposed to be pronounced. How did that come about, and what was that experience like?
Well, it came about because it was actually kind of funny because I was working on my some of my stuff with my Greyhawk campaign, and I was looking up stuff on the internet, looking to see if there are any resources out there, because there was good stuff to be found. There was a great website, I don't know if it's still around, but it was called Cannon Fire, and it was it was dedicated to all Greyhawk related stuff. And so I was mostly into the older type of Greyhawk stuff created by Gary and Rob Kuntz. But it covered everything. It may still be around, I really have no clue, but it was excellent. So anyway, I was searching around looking for Greyhawk stuff, and I randomly found that Gary Gygax had a call out for freelance submissions to partake in this project called Ixberg, which was the town set next to Castle Zagyg. And so I thought, oh great, I was a struggling writer at the time. I was trying to get my foot in the door with something, and I had some short fiction that I had published a few places, but really it was like fanzine type stuff. And so I decided I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to submit something to Gary. I created a few encounter areas and different NPCs, and sent them in the format that I believed that he wanted them in. And this was like on a Friday night back in 2005. So Monday morning comes along, and I'm opening up my email, and I see Gary Gygax in my inbox, and I panicked. Looking at it, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be my polite rejection form letter of some sort. And as it turned out, he liked what I had done, and welcomed me onto the team. So I started to write this sort of city block. The city was divided into all these sections, so that there were different authors each writing a different section of the city. So I had one, and then what ended up happening was other people were not making their deadlines, or they were quitting the project prematurely, so other city sectors were opening up. So I grabbed some of them. I said, and Gary, said, "You sure you can handle all these?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely." I wanted to do as much as I could, so I worked my tail off and submitted all of them on time for the deadline. And so one thing led to another, where Gary was looking for a co-author to write the famous dungeon itself. And so he and Steve Chenault, who was the publisher at Troll Lord Games, asked me if I would be interested in doing it. So I was like, of course. So that's basically how I fell into it. It started off as just a lucky, finding this post on the internet.
Gotcha.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you did that from 2005 to 2008, and I just have to ask, because, it sounds like things really took off for you there in 2005. I thoroughly enjoyed so many movies that came out in 2005. Would you concur with my sentiment that 2005 is maybe the best single year of the 2000s?
I don't know. I guess I can't concur. I don't concur.
Fair enough.
Tell me the movies.
Well, I mean, Batman Begins is a good one, but my favorite movie of all time is Sin City. And
Sin City was great. Yeah, I met Frank Miller and got his autograph in a Sin City comic book.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How was Frank when you met him?
He was kind of like, he was just kind of going through the motions. He wasn't I wouldn't say he was the most personable guy. Mm-hmm. And I had actually heard that before, and I was in line, that some people said he was kind of a jerk. But I mean, he was fine, but he wasn't someone that, you could tell that he wasn't very interested in interacting with the people who were in line to get his autograph, which is completely opposite for what I saw with like Gary Gygax. When I was working for him and we would do Gen Con, people would be lining up through the aisles of Gen Con, and I saw Gary treat every fan like they were an old friend. and they would share their stories about, different stuff like, I learned how to read by playing D&D, or, this helped me so much when I was young, and all these different things, like, people telling him that, it helped them to get a job and by, dungeon mastering skills. And so, I mean, he was so gracious. So I learned a lot watching from him, how to respect these fellow gamers, and really that they should be treated like peers.
Mm-hmm. That's very good to hear. I never got to meet Gary, because by the time I got into gaming, Gary had been dead for a few years. So I never got the chance to meet him. But it's great that so many people had such a great impression of him, and that he seemed to be a very genuine and engaging presence in the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then now, and I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent here, but I just have to know, was the Frank Miller meeting within the past 10 years? Because I know at a certain point, with health issues and other things going on in his personal life, Frank Miller very much changed.
This was, I would say, in the early to mid 90s.
Okay, gotcha. So even prime Frank Miller was a little bit disengaged.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Fair enough.
Maybe he was tired. I don't know.
Possibly.
It's all good.
And then just the other big movie from 2005 that I really enjoy is a movie called Thank You for Smoking.
I don't know what that is.
It's got Aaron Eckhart and J.K. Simmons and Robert Duvall. Okay. It's about a tobacco lobbyist and kind of his story in Washington. It's an interesting movie.
Oh, okay. It sounds vaguely familiar. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I do have a big choice when it comes to the 2000s, the best year for movies. Mm-hmm. But, I was looking at something the other day that was like something from 1983, and it was the list of movies that were all in the theaters at the same time, and it was mind-blowing. All these different, that became iconic films years later, and they were all in the theater at the same time. If you look around at some of those, the year, when they encapsulate a sort of a year in film, it's pretty amazing to see, how some of these great movies that we grew up loving were competing with each other for people's dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like if you think about it, two of the big movies that really got people interested in adventures in D&D, too, that are often cited when I talk to people about their inspirations. Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981, and then Conan the Barbarian in 1982. Those just a year apart there.
Right. Those are two huge inspirations for me as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Love that stuff. And I heard that they're making a new Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that Harrison Ford got hurt on the set recently or something.
Arguably too old to still be doing that. I don't know. I'm not going to touch that one tonight.
Right.
So when it comes to Hyperborea and this specific game setting that you find yourself releasing today and here to talk about this campaign, where did Hyperborea come from, and how did that start?
So when I was young, I was fascinated with the idea of Hyperborea in the Conan tales, and it's actually funny because back in the 1980s, I used to play a play-by-mail game. It was a war game called Hyborian War, and you pick a nation from the Hyborian Age of Conan, and you fight these other nations, and it's all about conquering. You could play Cimmeria, or you could play Aquilonia, or Turan, or these different, and it was this beautiful map. And I would always pick Hyperborea because they were sort of these, these evil sorcerers and warriors and witches and stuff like that. And I thought it was the coolest thing. I never won the game. I never actually did well at it, but I was persistent with it. And so it was basically you fill out your turn and you mail it in, because it was before the internet. It changed to an internet game, I think, in the 90s. And so I was fascinated with them. There was a Hyperborean character that was in the Conan story Tower of the Elephant. And so, different stuff like that got me interested. And then as I got older, I started to read more about the Greek mythology of Hyperborea. And then I got into Clark Ashton Smith's Hyperborean cycle, which really opened up, my imagination with, these, a combination of the pulp fiction representations of Hyperborea through Smith and through Howard, and the original Greek tales that were related to that, that were spoken by like Herodotus and Pindar and different Greek philosophers. And so I got really into all that stuff. And so it was I reached a point in my role-playing game design career where all of a sudden I had, the most awesome gig working for Gary in developing Castle Zagyg, to suddenly finding myself without a job because his widow had canceled all his creative works. And so I decided, after having worked on a project for years and really not benefiting from that in any financial way, I decided to take my ball and go home and create my own game, And so I knew I wanted to do something that was inspired by the pulps, but then also on the mechanics side, inspired by the works of Gygax and Arneson. And so I sort of merged these things together during a time where, I didn't see too many games that were a game married to a setting. In fact, a lot of popular notions had it that was the wrong thing to do, that you should create a generic system that can be applied to a number of different themes and settings, right? So you create a system that can then be applied to some type of modern horror or, high fantasy, or, a darker fantasy, a sword and sorcery, or science fiction even. And that's the way it should be done, is what I was hearing in a lot of places. And I decided I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do it my own way. I wanted to create not only a setting, but rules that actually supported that setting, so that it's not just a generic set of rules, that the character classes are actually built on themes that are explored in the lands and histories of this setting. And so and the monsters and the spells and different things like that. So so it really was a marriage of those two different concepts of setting and mechanics.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the RPG landscape of that time, you're looking at stuff like the D20 boom happening right then. Everyone's treating kind of those D&D D20 rules as a generic system. Savage World shows up at the time, so that's kind of all the rage then.
Because everybody hated 4th edition D&D so much, so they were all looking at these different D20 third-party creators who were still sort of riffing off the general idea of 3rd edition D&D, but then stuff like Savage Worlds coming out, that was very popular as well. And so yeah, definitely, I agree with that.
So you've done a good job describing it already, but let's say there's someone out there who is only familiar with 5th edition D&D or some of the more popular modern games right now. How would you describe Hyperborea to that person with the hopes of getting them to pick up a book?
Sure. It's actually interesting that I found in the last 2-3 years now that most of my newer customers, newer people who are getting interested in playing this game, come from a 5th edition background or even maybe a Pathfinder background. because there may be new players, or in some cases they're older players who played an early form of D&D back in the day, and then they got back into it because 5th edition was basically a good gateway drug to get back in.
Mm-hmm.
But they find themselves curious about older styles of play and variant styles of play. So, basically how I describe it is it's less super heroic than what you would find in 5th edition. Survivability is definitely not as high, because 5th edition sort of caters to and nurtures the development of characters in such a way, in my estimation, that makes it a little harder to die, right?
Yeah.
So you can get really attached to your character from the get-go. Whereas in older style of play, you sort of I hope this guy makes it to 5th level. I hope I can make it to, I hope my magician can make it to 5th level so I can get that lightning bolt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so also how I like to describe it is that there is a lot more resource management involved. The newer style of play, there is a lot at your fingertips, and it's at your fingertips, pervasively throughout. Some type of sorcerer class can fire a firebolt, right, constantly and do damage. Well, there's really no such thing in older style play. So you're really considering when you're going to cast that spell, when it's the right time, and you may conserve it more. And so, it's, to some people, it may seem like, I'd rather be able to do something all the time. But when you have resource management at work, you really, when you do something, use your spell, and it's effective, it's really meaningful in the game, and you feel like you made this huge contribution. And so there's just a different general feeling. I think that you can, when you have everything at your fingertips all the time, you can get a little bit jaded. And so I guess it's just a different sort of style and vibe. But at the end of the day, really what it's about is your creativity and your collaboration with your friends and family playing these games. So I think that there are some subtle differences like I described, but for the most part, when it really comes down to it, if you have a good game master and that has creative ideas and is really engaging, and the players become engaged with what's going on, that's really the most important thing, because rules sort of disappear into the background and all the other smaller nuances. And it's really about that, that fun and gameplay.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in chat over here, looks like Crafty Matt Craft kind of came from that old school background and then got back in through 5th edition. It also sounds like he has at least made several car payments for you, if nothing else.
Yep, I'm familiar with Matt.
So Matt, welcome, and Captain Courageous has joined us here as well.
Oh, excellent. Yes, that's David. He'll be doing his show later this week.
Absolutely. So, Captain Courageous, hopefully I don't steal all the questions that you asked, Jeff. So,
I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. There are people out there who do this a hell of a lot better than I do because they've been doing it for far longer than me. So I'm sure he'll be able to. Oh, apparently he's stealing mine. All right, so there we go. Hope you're taking notes.
That's great.
So this is now the kind of 3rd edition of Hyperborea that's on Kickstarter right now.
Yes.
When it comes to deciding, when this particular system needs a new edition, what's kind of the criteria of it's time now for the 3rd edition of Hyperborea besides, here's a good jumping on point? What
Sure.
mechanically kind of drives that?
Okay, well, I have a good answer to that because, It started off where we sold out of the second edition hardback, which was a complete all-in-one book.
Mhm.
And it sold out a lot quicker than I had anticipated. I wasn't ready for it. I started to panic a little bit that I'm not going to have a game available, and it's my core product. And so how it all began was, if we're going to do a new printing of the book, let's commission some new cover painting. And so then it becomes like, oh, well, let's add some more interior art. Maybe we'll add some new character class art and some new monsters. And then it's like, well, let's start to, I think the layout can be improved a little bit. Let's, start adjusting some of the layout. And then, you start to look at some of the character classes and the spells, and you're like, oh, I think that spell has the wrong range, or the duration is really short. Because the duration is really short on that spell, no one ever wants to cast it, So let's change that. And these little things, you change an ability for a class or something, and these little things start to build up and they start to compile. And you reach that point where you realize, this is not a reprint of the second edition of the book anymore. This is actually, we've gone from reprints to edition.
Yep.
But that being said, I like to look at the 3 editions of the game, sort of the way the guys in Chaos Scene have done Call of Cthulhu over the years. Well, I guess with the exception of 7th edition Call of Cthulhu, which was really the biggest jump for them mechanically from the original edition. But there have been very subtle changes and improvements over the years with the various first 6 editions of that game. And so I sort of embrace that sort of philosophy where backwards compatibility is really important to me. So whether you're playing the original box set edition of the game, of Hyperborea, or the second edition complete hardback, or if you have the 3rd edition that will be publishing in the near future, you can still buy any one of our adventure modules and play it without any issues. I like to say that it's about 95% compatible.
Gotcha. Cool. And then Matt in chat here again wants to know why you changed the combat phases. I don't know if that's something you want to talk about here, but if you do want to address
sure,
that,
it's not a problem. Not everyone is familiar with it, but in the original edition and first edition of the game, we had a 2-phase combat system, which you can basically your character can be doing a few different things in the course of the round. Basically, it could involve some movement in combat, or casting a spell followed by some movement. And using the phases basically determined whether you would go in the beginning of the round or the end of the round. So ideally, in the perfect world, the game has a group initiative mechanic. Okay.
Yep.
So the players roll a d6, and the game referee rolls a d6, and the highest roll goes first, and ties are resolved in order of dexterity. So before you make that initiative roll, you declare your actions if you're playing it by the book. So action declaration is the first thing that you do before you make that initiative roll. And so depending ideally how it would work by the 2-phase system, depending on what you say that you want to do, the referee would then decide if you're going to be able to perform in the first phase, or if you're going to be performing into the second phase, or possibly both. So that could be related to how much you moved, or different things that you would announce. So in theory, I always thought it was a great idea, but in execution, I found that for a lot of people, a lot of fellow referees and gamers around the world, that it was the thing that I got the most complaints about, that they just couldn't wrap their heads around the 2-phase system. I had people asking questions like, am I supposed to be doing action declaration for each of my phases, and things like that. And that wasn't really the intent. And I've seen it, debated. And so I decided that it was time to simplify it to a form that was actually closer to how I was running it with my home group anyway.
Mhm.
Especially at conventions, like that was real barometer for me over the years. You know, I've been running this game at various conventions since about 2010. So in over 10 years of playing it with different people from around the country and trying to sort of explain how the phase system works, I've gotten a lot of blank stares in a lot of cases. And so I always come back to the same thing. You don't need to know how it works. Just tell me what you want your character to do, and I'll let you know, how that gets resolved through the rules. But, you know, I just wanted to sort of peel it back a little bit and be less complex and make it more intuitive for everybody involved.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like Matt asking the question here in chat is a little bit more into the crunch, but when it comes down to it, I ultimately just myself fall more into the simple rules, you know, the keep it simple, stupid principle when it comes to a lot of these mechanics. It sounds like that's what you ran into a lot at the various conventions. So yeah, I mean, as far as initiative and stuff like that goes, while some people do enjoy crunch, there are certain aspects that need that simplicity and initiative, knowing when you're going and you know how to say what you want to do. That's very important, especially to OSR type gamers. They don't like a lot of roll this, add this, and if your car has half a tank of gas and the sun is at this precise angle, you get to go in this order.
Right. Right. Jupiter is aligned with Venus.
Yep, but then there's always that one guy who's like, actually, that system is perfect, and
right.
And Matt, I'm not saying that's you.
Taskmaster, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, that is it is definitely it does come down to preference a lot.
Yeah, I think so. So, you know, if there's people that love that two-phase system, there's nothing to stop them from continuing to run it that way if they so choose. But as far as the rules in the book of the third edition, we're just simplifying it a little bit and sort of cutting it down to a one, you know, just one phase basically. So it's just your action.
Absolutely. Now, because so much of this is, very inspired by Robert E. Howard, this is something that I love to talk about, and something that I haven't gotten to talk about recently. When it comes to Conan specifically, there are what I call the three Conans. There's movie Conan, book Conan, and then comic Conan. And from what you've said, it sounds like a lot of your inspiration is coming from the literary side. But when I look at the trade dress and some of the stuff that I've seen from Hyperborea books that I've seen in the wild, there's a lot of that comic influence to it too.
Oh, so yeah, absolutely.
Would you say that your tastes kind of lie more in the literary and comic side of things when it comes to Robert E. Howard?
Well, you know, I want to say that I started my fascination with Conan with those old Ace paperbacks. So when I was young, my brother had I shared a room with two brothers. We had bunk beds in the room, we lived in a small ranch. And when my oldest brother, Bob, was getting older, my dad basically built him a basement room, a basement pad that would be his cool little, room. So he had this bookshelf outside of his room where he had all these cool science fiction books and fantasy books. It's where I discovered, J.R. Tolkien and Isaac Asimov and different weird stuff like that. And so, but really those Frank Frazetta covers on those books really fascinated me. But at the same time, I'm not sure if it was before or after. My memory's a little hazy on it. I was getting into the Conan comic books. And I actually still remember the first Conan comic book that I ever bought. And it's basically Conan is in this arena and he's fighting this big bear. And it seems like the bear is going to kill him. And so he manages to get these shackles, this chain, and wrap it around the bear's neck and choke the bear to death. And I was just so fascinated by that when I was a kid. I remember I was reading it at my grandmother's house because I was staying there. She lived down the beach, and I used to go stay with her sometimes. And I remember I was so excited about it that I had to get a paper and pencil. I wanted to draw Conan choking out a bear with this chain. And I drew it in all these different ways. I was so excited. So the comic books were definitely a huge inspiration for me too. And I loved reading the different adaptations of various Howard tales. And I was always I always thought it was really cool to see the differences in how they were adapted in Conan the Barbarian versus Savage Sword of Conan, which had a lot less rules attached to it. There was a lot more violence and nudity and things like that. So of course, when you're a kid, you're just attracted to that brutality and sexuality all involved in this magazine. It almost felt like you should be hiding it. You don't want your mother to see that you have this magazine that she probably thinks is just a comic book. So it was fascinating for me at the time, and so I sort of carried that with me over the years as one of my primary inspirations, which is so one of my artists is Val Simix, who actually did some art for Savage Sword of Conan. He did a Cull backup story, and he also drew Conan the Barbarian for a while. So he's well known in those circles, and so I have the honor and pleasure of working with Val since 2015 now, and he's still doing art for me now. I have some new art that he's done for the 3rd edition Hyperborea book. Gotcha. So he's just he's probably way. So you see behind me here, this that's some of Val's art there, so and so it's just a big part of it. Yeah.
Now, when it comes to those Marvel books, I just have to ask, do you think John Buscema or Barry Smith did kind of the better visual adaptation of Conan?
My favorite was Big John, especially when he was being inked by Alfredo Alcala. It was just magic, I thought. But I loved Barry Smith's art, and I think that he was, even though I like Buscema better personally, I think that Smith was more important because he really set the tone of what was to happen, what was to go on after. And I don't know that Buscema would have been as good as he was if he didn't follow in the footsteps of Smith.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one of the collections. It just has Barry Smith stories in it. I haven't gotten the Savage Sword collection.
Yeah, I think there was only like 25 or 20, the first 25 or 26 issues that he did, or something like that.
But yeah, and you can see this, like, if you read the Weapon X saga. Barry Smith is a fantastic artist. His detail work is phenomenal. The things that he's able to bring out of those Conan stories. The way he draws, you mentioned it already, the Tower of the Elephant. That adaptation in particular is fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Loved it.
But when it comes to my mental image of Conan the Barbarian, I think John Buscema kind of pulls what Howard describes and what my mind paints as a picture of Conan a little bit better than the way Smith draws him, which is not at all a knock on Barry Windsor Smith.
Sure, yeah. I agree with that. Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel as well.
Gotcha. And before we move on, I'll just go ahead and drop that my last name Howard. I'm one of those Howards. I'm related to Robert E. Howard.
You are?
Yes, I am.
Oh wow, that's fantastic.
I'm a distant relative. Everyone at home take a shot because I mentioned that I'm a distant relative of Robert E. Howard. I'm gonna try and go at least 2 episodes now without bringing that up.
Okay.
but yeah, I closely enough related that I can, brag about it and say it's cool and go, but my last name's Howard and, he's a 5th cousin, but not closely related that I'm making any money off of Conan or anything like that.
Right. I getcha. Um, have you read or do you prefer any of the biographies on him?
I haven't actually dug into any of the like outside biographies of him. The one that I have read is it was at the beginning of a Solomon Kane collection that I read. H.P. Lovecraft's eulogy of
Oh yeah,
Robert E.
of course.
Howard
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that's
That's quite famous.
mhm,
Um, then I would give you a recommendation. I've read several of them, and the one by Mark Finn called Blood and Thunder
gotcha.
is unbelievable biography on him, and he really dug in and did an amazing amount of research into people that knew Howard, and it's sort of a more I would say it's a more objective take
Okay.
on Howard than what we saw in the past when DeCamp was doing his biographies on him when he was basically functioning as an armchair psychologist,
Mhm.
which a lot of people take issue with for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, it's sad how Robert ended his life when he did and how he did, but um, but I really found that Finn's biography was really fascinating because so much of it, when he gets into Howard's early life, is really an examination of what it's like to live in that Texas small frontier town
Mhm.
that overnight turns into an oil boom town,
Yeah.
and how the impact that had on him.
Mhm.
And it actually, when you look at it and you read how Finn describes it, it really makes a lot more sense about Howard's running theme of civilization versus barbarism and his
Mhm.
thoughts on that, and why he had this ongoing debate with H.P. Lovecraft about the
Mhm.
merits of barbarism versus the merits of civilization.
Mhm.
And so it's a really like I said, a fascinating biography.
Mhm. I would be interested, and this is like some weird academic stuff that I'm getting into now, but I would be really interested in some kind of work comparing and contrasting Howard's thoughts and themes about barbarism versus civilization with Ted Kaczynski's manifesto. I think there's a lot of interesting ground to be covered there. Not saying that Robert E. Howard would ship bombs to people making computers,
Right.
but having read the Unabomber manifesto, that's Kaczynski's whole mission statement is that civilization has become out of control. So setting those two things next to each other and seeing how these two different guys who came to similar conclusions about the modern world they lived in, uh, how they reached those conclusions. That would be an interesting
Yeah.
exercise.
Yeah. Maybe it would.
And Matt, I have read at least the Jason Aaron Conan, and I thought it was pretty good. I haven't read anything after. I haven't read Jim Zub's Conan. I should read some of what he's doing because obviously Jim Zub is a huge gamer and contributor to D&D in particular. So but yeah, I do like some of the newer Conan comics that have been coming out too. Have you read any of those, Jeff?
I have purchased several of them, but I have not dug in to read them yet.
Gotcha.
So, but I was actually curious about Zub's work as well because I've heard, I don't know, I guess I've heard some good things, but I've heard some, it's tough because critics are a dime a dozen. So you're not sure. It's like I like to judge something myself and try not and take critiques with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my only issue with and I've not perused enough of Zub's work both in and out of gaming to have formed an opinion on his like body of work, but one thing that I kind of took issue with when he did the Rick and Morty D&D set, he had this whole note that was from Rick talking about how it's all about power in role playing and how that's the most important thing to players. And having kind of entered this this OSR space, which is very much about not making characters as powerful as they can be, but, you know, giving them a struggle to overcome so that when they have that power, you know, there's been a journey that they've been on to become this powerful thing. I took a little bit of issue. Yeah, I took a little bit of issue with his statement there, you know, saying that D&D was all about power.
Right.
Which maybe,
I mean, was it supposed to be tongue in cheek though? I don't know.
And that's the thing. That's why I'm not gonna, you know, say Jim Zub's a moron, because
right.
It could have just been, again, he was writing it as Rick Sanchez, so it could have just been, this is what Jim Zub thinks Rick would think.
Right. Right.
But when
I could see that.
But when I look at 5th edition, I'm like, maybe 5th edition is all about power.
I don't know. I mean, I've played it.
Mm-hmm.
I played it somewhat, but I played a heavily house-ruled version of it.
Yeah.
So I'm not completely familiar with all the ins and outs of 5th edition,
Mm-hmm.
but it does seem to me that the power curve is substantially higher. You can achieve quite a lot. Mm-hmm. I was playing a ranger for a time, and the ranger could cast spells, and I found that like at a low level, I could heal the entire party as a ranger. And it just seemed to me, it just seemed absurd to me. I couldn't believe that I could do it, but I could allocate all my spell slots to these healing spells, and I had so many spells, and I could, you know, function as a complete healer for the party after a battle.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of my first indications to me that this is like, wow, this is really unbelievable amount of power. You know, you have to be so. I'd want to say if you were playing AD&D 1st edition, I think you'd have to be like an 8th level ranger before you could even get like a druid cure light wound spell. Mm-hmm. or something like that. So it's, you know, it's so different.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's not necessarily wrong either. Like I said earlier, it's just a different type of play style. It's a different type of expectation for the participants at the table.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love 5th edition. I play it all the time. It's the system that I learned on. It's how I got in. But yeah, there is something weird about being a ranger, and you reserve the one spell slot for Hunter's Mark, so you can get your damage each round, but then everything else you can pretty much just put into Cure Wounds.
That's exactly what I did. Those are the two that I had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then Matt again in chat here makes a good point that you know, 1E, 2E, BX, DCC does this really well. It's about going from farm to hero, and then 5E is about going from hero to superhero.
Sure, yeah, I guess that's an apt analogy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, it's fun sometimes. Most of the time. I'll say most of the time, but personally, I'm seeking a different challenge, but I'll save that for next week because Eric Tankar is going to be on.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool.
So when it comes to this particular campaign that we have here, first of all, for the 3rd edition, who all is contributing from the art side of things?
Oh, great question. So, Charles Lang, who did the art for the original box set of the game, and then the 2nd edition hardback, which you can see right here. Charles Lang is back. We're doing a 2-volume set this time. Mm-hmm. So he's done the cover art for both of the books, and they both look fantastic. You can see them both on the Kickstarter page and in the video on the Kickstarter page. And so he's back, and as I mentioned earlier, Val Smex is back, and Val did a few different pictures that have been colored by Daisy Bingham. Daisy is an incredible colorist, and she has been coloring Val's work for us for years now. So they have a great relationship as far as her understanding you know, what he's doing in the picture when he draws. So it's a great collaboration between the two of them from two different sides of the world, because he lives in upstate New York and she lives in New Zealand. So then her husband, Jonathan, has been doing art for Hyperborea since she's going back to about 2010. So John's been doing art for us forever. So yeah, so Jonathan is back. And so then, some of the other color plate. So we do these color. It's mostly a black and white book, but we do full color plates within. And so we have Peter Mullen back. He's doing a few color pictures that are in there as well. We have David Miller, who's a fantasy artist as well. He did a lot of work in AD&D second edition and various other TSR stuff in the 90s before he primarily went into a different career path with commercial art. But he still really enjoys taking part in fantasy art. So we have Mike Tenebrae, who's a South African artist. He's been doing some art for us for a few years now. He did a beautiful cover for our Rats in the Walls adventure module, which is inspired by the H.P. Lovecraft story of the same name. And so then one of the other great features of this of the third edition hardback is that I mentioned earlier how I had decided that when we were going to reprint the second edition that maybe I should do some new player character art. And so I brought on Diogo Nogueira, who's from Brazil, who's a great artist, and he's a brilliant creator. He's an artist, he's a writer, he designs games, he designs all kinds of shorter running fantasy games like beer and pretzel type games, and he's got an incredible imagination between science fiction games that he creates and zombie apocalypse games and all kinds of stuff. If you look him up, Diogo Nogueira, he's a really inventive, creative person. So he's done all the character class art. So he's done 26 different character class illustrations. We have Del Tigler, who's come back. Del has gone back to the drawing board for us as far as redrawing all the weapons, and he's a great student of weapons through the ages. So when you ask him to draw a long sword or a spear, he's going to give you 8 different versions of it, and how it's been portrayed, how they've been forged in various cultures of the world. So he's really great at that, and he's also doing these beautiful chapter frames. So it's like when you have the open spread of the book, it's a frame that goes all the way around the outside edge of the book, that it will have all these different like characters and events going on and things like that, and all the things that are sort of related to that chapter when that chapter starts. So it's a great diversity of creative talents who are contributing to the next edition of the book. We have a new editor, George Sedgwick, who's got some great experience himself working in the field, and he's also a high school English teacher, so he brings that experience with him. So it's really great. And then so we're also coupling the release of the game with a new adventure module. And the adventure module is called The Late Trapper's Lament, and it's a great introductory adventure. I like to provide a nice early low-level adventure when you come out with something new like this, so that people who are jumping on for the first time have the opportunity to have something new to experience with it. So this adventure has been written by David Prada, who is a longtime editor of the Hyperborea game, and so he's written this adventure that is going to be is being featured in this Kickstarter. And other creators, Glenn Seal, who is an amazing cartographer and game designer as well. We went back to the Hyperborea map that he drew for the second edition, and we recolored it and relaying it out with some different text labeling and stuff like that. It's essentially the same map, but but the colors are more vibrant. I feel that it's a better color palette. And we're also trying something different. In the second edition hardback, the map was a 32-inch by 40-inch folded map that was tucked into the book, which is great. But one of the things that I like to try to feature with everything that I do with this game is game utility. I always want something. I'm always trying to think of what works best at the table. And the way that I usually figure this out is convention games and playing with my Tuesday night crew. And although a folded up map is great and you can tack it onto a wall, or you can throw it out on the table in front of everyone, I decided that this time around I wanted to try something a little bit different. We're doing an atlas this time. So it's basically like a saddle stitch booklet of full color sections of the map, so that it's more easily accessible. So the game referee can have it right next to him or her and be referring to a portion of the map of Hyperborea, and not have to worry about unfolding this monstrous poster, right, to find where you are. And it's also useful for the players because it can just be passed around the table or whatever, or laid out wherever. So I think that we'll do some type of special material map that can be displayed like we've done before. We've done canvas maps in the past, which have been very popular. We'll probably do something like that with this new fancy colored version of the Hyperborea map. But for this project, we're going forward with this atlas by Glenn Seal, and I think it's going to look great. So it's very much a lot of the same people that we've been working with for years. And one of the great things too that I've got going on with this is my daughter is also an artist, Sky, and she has done a couple of new illustrations for the book as well that are going to be included. And her art is phenomenal. You wouldn't know that if you were flipping through the pages of this book and looking at these seasoned veteran artists, you would not be able to tell the difference that a couple of these pictures were illustrated in pen and ink by a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
So
Fair
it's
enough.
great.
Awesome. And guys, this is currently on Kickstarter. It's going for the next 26 days as of the time we're having this conversation right now. And there's all kinds of great stuff you can get here. One of my favorites, not mentioning even the player's handbook, the referee's manual, the atlas, and the Late Trapper's Lament, but there is also an add-on for a black metal logo Hyperborea t-shirt, which if you're into that kind of stuff, is awesome.
Yeah, so we have that, and we do. So that logo is also being stamped with foil stamping onto a leatherette cover, which is an alternative version of the book that people can order. And so I've actually, it was one of those things where I came up with this idea of doing like a death metal version logo or a black metal version logo of Hyperborea. I thought, what if we stamped it on a leatherette type of cover? And, I bet some people would like it. Well, it's turned out to be hugely popular. That pledge level has been doing just as well as the pledge level for the standard book. So I guess a lot of people agree that it sort of resonates with them. I mean, whether you don't even have to be into that type of music to just look at it and say that thing is pretty cool,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. And it very much fits with kind of the tone and the world of Hyperborea itself. So that's a little bit harder than I like my music, but that kind of logo and stuff, that's an aesthetic I can appreciate.
Yes, I mean, so here's the deal. There's this company called Turned Metal, and what Turned Metal does is they'll take your logo. They can take Rollin Bones, and they will make a metal version of your logo. It might not look necessarily like mine. It could be, dripping blood, or it could look like some weird tree or something like that. However the heck you would want it, you can just describe it to them, and they make a metal version of your logo. So those are the people who did this for me, and they did a fantastic job. They gave me a couple of options too. They draw a few different things, and basically want to know, so which direction are you thinking? Which one do you kind of like? And then they take it from there, from the pencil stage to, digitally recreating it. And I was happily surprised to see, how awesome it came out.
Absolutely. Now, musically, is that kind of like where your tastes lie, or?
I do like that stuff, but
Gotcha.
It's not my favorite type of stuff. My whole life, my favorite two bands have been Iron Maiden and Rush.
Okay.
So that's where my favorite stuff. And I'm also a big classical music fan.
We're gonna get along just fine.
Great. I love Power Windows. Great stuff.
I love those two bands as well. Iron Maiden is kind of a more recent thing for me, but Rush is right up my alley there. So
yeah.
In fact, I was walking around North Texas on Friday with a Rush T-shirt on. So.
Oh, nice! I can't believe I didn't notice you. You must have a forgettable face.
Maybe I do. I don't. Although I was the only one there, and again, not trying to throw too much shade at it, I was the only one there, or one of the few there that had my hair is this color, and I'm under 40.
Right.
So
you're not bald or gray?
Yeah, I'm not bald or gray. I don't have a ponytail.
A ponytail like the comic book guy from The Simpsons.
No offense, everyone.
Hey, I can make fun of people's hair because I'm bald, so you got me beat either way. I make fun of somebody's hair, and there's the typical joke, because my brother went gray when he was in high school. He had this weird thing when he started getting gray hair in high school. So my whole life I've been making fun of him. I'm like, oh wow, your hair looks a little grayer. His hair's all white now. Mm-hmm. And I say to him, why is your hair getting grayer? And of course, it always comes back to, well, at least I have hair, So it always comes back to that.
Was it punishment for all the jokes that you hurled his way?
Yeah, I suppose so. I had long hair in the 80s, and I remember being like a young 20-something, 22 years old, and taking a shower and looking down at the shower ring and seeing all this hair in the shower ring, and oh no, what is happening here? So yeah, the writing was on the wall, or the shower ring, as it were.
Yeah, my dad is completely bald, so I'm afraid every day that this might not last.
Enjoy it while you've got it, right?
Mm-hmm. Although I am, by the time my dad was my age, he had completely lost all of his hair. So I think I can hold on to mine. I think.
Okay. Yeah.
So maybe. There's that. So, like I said, this is on Kickstarter right now. It is fully funded. Actually, fully funded in, was it 7 minutes? First 7 minutes? It was
17. Yeah.
17. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So Hyperborea is coming. You still have time to jump on it, though. Plenty of great reward tiers here. If you want PDFs, if you want print. I like that you've bundled the PDFs with all the print tiers.
Yep.
I know that's pretty much expected practice, but there are some companies, Magic users who live on the ocean who don't do that kind of thing. So,
well, we only do it during our Kickstarters. Once the Kickstarter is done, we sell our PDFs on Drive-Thru RPG, and we don't manage any of that. It's its own separate thing, and we sell books from our website. So It's not really a thing that we do after. I know that some companies can do that because they have their own internal servers, and they can just pump out PDFs, and so it's not part of our business model after the Kickstarter. So it's a nice little perk during the Kickstarter that for people who want both. Personally, I don't really get into PDFs. I start to read them and it bothers my eyes after a little while. I much more prefer print. But it's a good tool though to access things, especially some of these. When you want to go to Drive-Thru RPG and pick up like an old AD&D module or something like that you'd like to check out, and you can get it really cheap as opposed to the collector's market the way it is, because the collector's market for these older materials has gone completely berserk in the last year or two. Prices are just insane. It's kind of funny because it's like the role-playing game collectible market has finally become similar to the comic book market, right? Where all of a sudden these things that were easily accessible for years have suddenly shot up in huge amounts of value.
Oh yeah. Even some of the like newer stuff, just because of like limited print runs, one of my grails is finding a complete set of Green Ronin's D20 DC game using the Mutants and Masterminds rules, just because I'm a huge DC Comics guy. But those books are ungodly expensive.
Yeah, yeah, I have a similar thing because I'm a huge Michael Moorcock fan, and the Hawk Moon. I recently reread his Hawk Moon series, so I decided I'd like to, try to get all the Hawk Moon books that were done. I think it was by Mongoose in the 2000s, and it's just so impossible to find them, and they're so expensive. When you do, you look on eBay, and it's like, I don't want to spend $60 for it, I just want to read it.
Yep. Yep, same with Saga editions for Star Wars. That game's fantastic, but again, books are super expensive. That kept me from buying a complete original Dark Sun box set in Texas. Just looking at it, I was like, oh, no. I was like, I'd kind of like this. And then looking at it, I was just like, ooh, no.
Oh, boy. Who had that? Etten Games?
I think so.
Games
Yeah, it was Etten Games.
Yeah, Dave Donahue. He always has great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a big supporter of Hyperborea. He always carries it. I'm sure he's going. If he's not in already, he'll be in on the retail pledge level for the Kickstarter. He's been a retailer who's carried our stuff for years.
Absolutely. Well, we are, coming up on the the end of our time here. Obviously, the Kickstarter campaign, guys. If you look up Hyperborea 3E, you'll be able to find it. I'll put a link in the description when the replays go up here. But besides the campaign, if there's anything else that you've got to plug before we go off the air here, Jeff, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, that's basically what we're doing right now. We do. I will say, if you're watching this live tonight, I mean, if you see it on some kind of rebroadcast on YouTube, then it's not going to be applicable. But we do also have right now going on a 4th of July sale that's going to end tonight. I may just extend it till tomorrow morning in case you're watching it now. But it's basically a BOGO deal on the player's manual for our 2nd edition book. So you buy one player's manual, we'll send you 2. So we have that going on right now. And but other than that, all our focus has been on this Kickstarter campaign for the 3rd edition of Hyperborea. So if you'd like to check that out, watch the video and see all the new art that is being featured in that, and check out the different pledge levels. We have a variety of pledge levels that you can see in it, from like Ryan mentioned, you can get things in PDF, or you can go to print, or you can get those leatherette versions of the print, which are actually going to be signed and numbered to the leatherette ones. And then we're going to have some cool add-ons like the T-shirt that you mentioned, and if you wanted to just pick up just a player's manual, that's a more reasonably priced pledge level, because it's not the full set of books. And for every set of books that you order, you get an atlas, and then there's also that starter module that we talked about. So it's a lot of cool stuff, and it's hopefully if you're into sword and sorcery and weird science fantasy, and you want to do something that's a little bit different than your average high fantasy type game, and you want to experience something that's a little more flavored in the sense of the pulps of Robert E. Howard and Clark Ashton Smith and H.P. Lovecraft, and you want to sort of experience that type of play, check it out.
Absolutely. And if you can't get enough of Jeff and you want to hear a little bit more about Hyperborea 3E, you're going to be doing a couple more appearances this week. Captain Courageous, you're going to be on with him.
So I'll be on with Captain Courageous, and I'll also be on with Bill Sylvie, who does mostly an AD&D type of broadcast. So so those 2 are coming up this week. And then uh, later in the month, I'll have a few other ones too that I'll be announcing on various social media. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And we also have a very active forum for Hyperborea where players exchange ideas. So if you go to hyperborea.tv, you can find our community forums from there. And people exchange ideas. They, show their house rules and spells and talk about their campaign, and they ask questions and generate ideas. So it's a lot of fun seeing the active community, participating in that manner.
Gotcha. And then last question here before we sign off: are you planning on going to Gamehole Con this year?
Oh yes. So I'm gonna be an industry guest at Gamehole this year. Right now I have planned either 3 or 4 games that I'll be running, and I'm also taking part in a panel discussion on game design.
Awesome.
I'll be there.
Sweet.
I'm looking forward to it.
So any of you guys out there who are going to Gamehole Con, you'll be able to see him there, and I will see you there because I'm going this year. It's my first Gamehole Con.
Oh, nice. Don't be a stranger this time. If you see
Absolutely.
me, flag me down.
Absolutely. They've got that fantastic GM's lounge that I've heard about from the website. So there will be lots of me walking up to people going, "Hey, we did an interview and I'm just introducing myself now."
Yeah. That's cool.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in this evening. As I said earlier in the show, next week, Eric Tenkar from Tenkar's Tavern, he's going to be on, and we are going to be talking a lot about not just his background, but I think the bulk of our conversation is going to talk about bringing some youth into the OSR movement, what that would look like, how to make it happen, and how to do so without taking away from what the OSR movement is and stands for and what makes it unique. So that's going to be an interesting conversation that I'm looking forward to having with Eric. I'll be doing an introduction to Dungeon Crawl Classics. Not a review, but an introduction to DCC sometime soon. And towards the end of July, headed into August, we will be starting Nighthaven Shades of Grey, an actual play event with the Page brothers, John and Joe, and the guys from Gamertarians. We'll be doing that here on Rollin' Bones. That's all coming up soon. But until then, guys, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I am so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I'll see you guys next time.
Excelsior.
Excelsior.